Do you think that employees really feel that level that they are part of the brand's success?
The data says they don't.
Mm-hmm.
Forget who it was. Somebody just did a really large survey. It might have been the conference board or somebody. And the data had been consistent for the last 3 years. And so they're asked, the question was really more around how much of the skills, the value that you can bring to the job, do you feel like you're able to do every day on the job? And it's just stayed at 26%. So people feel like companies aren't utilizing 75% of what they could bring to the job and we're doing a really bad job of it.
Yeah.
But some of the way to get there is to look into your company and see who the people who do model that and who get that are. And start to think about what are the characteristics of them and the way that they approach the work. And can we somehow energize that in the other folks? When your culture, your products and service, and your brand proposition are aligned, there's actually research that shows that there's an increase in brand equity, which is to say, what's the value of your brand out in the marketplace, and in performance. Because when these things aren't aligned, you get a lot of dysfunction and things that are competing against one another. Leaders for years have been coming to me and saying, I want to shift my organizational culture. And I've told them, look, organizational culture is a lagging indicator of what you do in these other 3 quadrants. So if you really want to shift your culture, focus on these other 3 areas. And that's really how you get it done.
So then my last question for you today, which we ask all of our guests, is what has been your recipe to revenue? What's been your secret sauce in your career?
My secret sauce? Well, for me personally,
Welcome back to Recipe to Revenue. I am here today with Karl Johnson, the founder of Sage Consulting. And I am so excited to have you here today, Karl. I'm looking forward to hearing everything you're going to share with us about culture and brand. And you are an expert in the space of change management, which, I think big organizations are very, very familiar with. And I think smaller organizations have heard the term, maybe don't really know all that, much about it. So I'm excited for you to share your experience and how organizations of all sizes can think about this and leverage it in their businesses. And let's start a little bit with your background. You come from some pretty large companies and now are in your own business, Mars, Cargill. So start, going back a few years and tell us how you got into this.
Yeah, sure. I have, like many people, a career that zigzags. So I actually spent a long time initially working and running management consulting groups out of business schools, which was an innovative business model, essentially partnering up with faculty and external consultants to take their kind of obtuse intellectual property, turn it into frameworks and tools that we could actually use with clients. So as a consequence, having been at these large companies, I've actually consulted into quite a few organizations that folks on the podcast would recognize. Most recently, I've been at Mars, and before that, Cargill. Mars, I think your folks probably know, it's Snickers, pet food, things of that nature, branded products. And Cargill is actually the largest family-owned business in the U.S., larger than any other privately held, only because Walmart trades a few shares. Well, Walmart would be about 6 times the size of Cargill, but Cargill would, on the Fortune 500, I think it would be around 20. And then it was Syngenta, which is another product-based company selling seeds and crop protection to farmers. And in those internal roles and in the consulting that I've done before, you're right, it's been a lot of change management, a lot of, and actually work, as we'll see as we get a little further in the conversation, that really does impact and sometimes starts with culture in organizations. And as we get into it too, I'll talk a little bit about the brand folks that I worked with in academia early in Berkeley, and what they saw as this close alignment and relationship to company culture, which I'm hoping folks on the podcast find interesting.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, in that academia space where it crosses over with the real world is such an interesting dynamic, taking that, intellectual side of it and making that practical application of it. So having that skill set is pretty unique and kind of living in that zone. So tell us a little bit of the type of projects that you worked on there, because that's an interesting space.
Yeah, well, as I was saying at Berkeley, if I go back, that was the first university I worked with. I also
Hmm.
was with Notre Dame and with the University of Minnesota.
Yeah.
And so at Berkeley, we were actually doing work in this culture space really early because there's a really groundbreaking professor, Jennifer Chapman, who's actually now the dean of the school.
Hmm.
And she had a leading through culture approach, which was pretty revolutionary at the time. So we were actually working with organizations. Jenny was doing a lot of work with Kaiser Permanente, for instance,
Sure.
and really talking about and helping people understand that the influence that culture can have on the workplace. And you mentioned change before, and many of these principles are really similar around
Hmm.
understanding what are the mindsets of people and how to shift those mindsets in the space of culture, really to align with the strategy and the business prerogatives of the business. So that's where I cut my teeth there. But
Yeah.
also, Acre is a really famous brand guru. Some folks in marketing
Hmm.
read some of his books, and I was working with the fellow Rashi Glazer, who first brought to my attention this relationship between culture and business performance and consumer experience.
Yeah.
And then again, we took those same principles of working with professors in marketing and strategy uh, um, on the road with other companies in those other business schools at University of Minnesota. We actually had a really large engagement with 3M,
Hmm.
and there we were building out a center of excellence around marketing.
Hmm.
And so again, we were actually teaching these principles of brand and
Yeah.
innovation and consumer and customer insights, those types of things. But also, one of the cool things about 3M is they have a culture of innovation, which is
Hmm.
really important to how the customers perceive them. So when we showed up at 3M, they said, we're great. We sit here, we innovate these products, we take them to the shipping dock, and we just kind of push them off the edge and see if they
Yeah.
land. Because they think that
Yeah.
this marketing capability
Well, yeah.
really needed to kind of bring the products to market. And for those
Hmm.
who don't know, 3M Post-it notes. There's a lot in automotive where they have materials that are used
Sure.
in auto body shops and in the dental space. I mean, they just have a whole range and they really compete on innovation. And it's that
Hmm.
internal culture where they actually allow employees to spend up to 15% of their time working on pet projects
Hmm.
built into their
I love that.
DNA
Yeah.
for decades.
Yeah.
And it really shows in actually the experience that people have with their products. Yeah.
Yeah. Years ago, I did some consulting when I was at my first marketing agency I worked at with American Express, and they had a group within the company called the Test Kitchen. So
Yeah.
similar function where they got to experiment, and they did a lot where they took different divisions within the company and kind of mashed them together to see what would happen. So that's I always found that very interesting, and that culture of allowing that type of innovation in house
Yeah.
is pretty special.
Well, what you're talking about, well, I've got a couple slides I'll share later, but we call that working in the white space because large organizations are great about crushing innovation. They become bureaucratic and small organizations too, right? If you become too focused on the business of the day, you're actually robbing yourself of the future. And so the reason that your company and others carve these things out and take them out of the hierarchy and the structure of the org is so that they can live in this space where they're protected. We used to call it
Yeah.
skunk works,
Uh-huh.
and that's the principles of Agile are the same: to take a team of people, take them out of the system and the reporting line,
Hmm.
and then let them run really hard and explore and innovate outside of all the constraints that
Right.
normally sit within a company around the motive for profit and
Hmm. Hmm.
sometimes overrides the motive for a longer term innovative kind of perspective. Yeah.
Yeah. So where does that thought of allowing that space to happen come from? Is there, that person who's the catalyst typically in the organization that says, let's do this? Is it leadership saying we need to be more competitive? What has been your experience in that?
Yeah. So if we look at, and this is just, I've kept these slides simple purposely because these are pretty simple concepts. So the idea here, and there's some research down below, and I can share the slides and I'll put them on my LinkedIn profile too if people want to get down and actually look at the source of this. But
yeah.
In those early conversations I was having at Berkeley, really what they were pointing out is that when your culture, your products and service, and your brand proposition are aligned, there's actually research that shows that there's an increase in brand equity, which is to say, what's the value of your brand out in the marketplace and in performance. Because when these things aren't aligned, you get a lot of dysfunction and things that are competing against one another. So, in an instance in Minnesota, I was working with a company, Polaris, and Polaris has an amazing culture that completely fits their brand. So they're in the power sports sector, which means motorcycles.
Right.
They have these Razor off-road vehicles that are just amazing. And when I started working with them, it was just, you just couldn't help but feel it. And they brought in a new CEO, Scott Wine, and these folks were all power sports enthusiasts and very, very driven around performance and about engineering and innovation. And so the way that they differentiate in the marketplace is that all of their brands tend to be outperform the competitors and are durable and have a greater reliability. For instance, they bought Chief, or Indian motorcycles, and it was a dying brand. And they actually revived it and started stealing share from Harley Davidson because their product was a better ride, it handled better, it was reliable, all the performance metrics around it were better than Harley, and they could sell them for similar or a little lower price point than Harley and grab some market share. So, one example too around that is the CEO, Scott Wine. They purchased a Super Bowl ad, and it had him in their off-road vehicle, the race,
nice.
like going over a dune and catching air, and landing.
Yeah.
And for those who knew Polaris, it was perfect because he really would do that. So
Yeah.
it was one of those examples where you really get that alignment.
Yeah, that certainly can create a different set of, they have that insider feel that they know that it's him, and pride of the CEO actually out there using the product. So, it creates a different kind of sense internally than just getting the publicity of that Super Bowl ad.
Yeah, that's right. And your customers can feel that. I guess another example would be UPS and FedEx. UPS really, its foundation is actually on customer intimacy. They get your packages there on time. But UPS person shows up and, their whole foundation is around charismatic, relationship-driven people who are delivering packages.
Yeah.
And they become your friends. If you're in an office setting, the same UPS person shows up.
Yeah, see them every day.
Whereas FedEx, very transactional, not really the same thing. If you look at the trucks, the UPS trucks are actually in much better shape, and it's a better driving experience for the driver. And FedEx, they're a little ratty. And so it's you see this in a lot of different ways. And so I think your viewers and your listeners ought to think about what is it that really differentiates us when we're out in this brand external space. And what are the characteristics of our employees and of a culture we might prefer that would support that and really actually strengthen that experience that your customers have?
Yeah, that's a really fascinating point there about even just, the seats in the UPS truck being more comfortable. When we're thinking of brand, people think of the colors, the packaging, messaging, but it just goes so much beyond that, you're saying. And so as a business that's out there listening, how could they think innovatively, like you're saying, think so deeply within a company?
Yeah, well, I'll give you another simple paradigm here.
Hmm.
And this is what's called an integral model, quadrant model. And
Hmm.
so these are where people who are driving the business, they really need to think across these four quadrants. And this also relates to change management. So
Hmm.
if we start up in the upper left quadrant, that's really there. And what it represents is, what are your employees feeling? What's going on in their inner world?
Yeah.
Do they have an understanding of the mission of your company, of your purpose, of what's really important to your
Hmm.
clients and customers? And do you actually have values that you can point to? And
Hmm.
just like 1 to 3 descriptions of what your values are can go a long way.
Yeah.
Mars is one of those places that does this really well.
Hmm.
And Mars has had a commitment to its employees, and it has very clear organizational values. One of them that's real interesting is around freedom. And it's
Hmm.
really, Mars being a private company, it's about freedom to operate.
Mm.
And, um, and so as we kind of move around the circle, that means that you start to see the commitment to that in these other quadrants, and I'll kind of talk
Hmm.
about those. So if we go to the upper right, that's observable behavior, can be of leaders in your company and of the employers. And obviously,
Hmm.
if you're leading your company, people are looking at you, and the spotlight's always on you,
Yeah.
and they're looking at your language and your behavior and your actions.
Hmm.
And so, I like to talk in terms of, what's your say-do ratio? Because if you're saying one thing and you're doing another,
Yeah.
people pick up on it right away.
Hmm. That's
And
great.
there's a bit of the walk the talk to idea there too. So
Right.
when we're talking to people about establishing culture, a lot of the work starts up in these upper two quadrants. It's thinking
Hmm.
about, where do you think your employees sit today in terms of their understanding of your mission, your purpose? Do they trust the organization? Do they have a
Hmm.
commitment to the values, even if they're unspoken? And then if you want to shift culture or strengthen culture as a leader or someone within the organization that impacts others, you really got to think about, what are those languages and behaviors and actions that are in alignment,
Hmm.
say, you either have or you want to have in the future. And those languages and behaviors are very reinforcing. They don't know. You also have that internal upper left quadrant, but people don't know what's going on in your mind.
Sure.
What you have to go by is what you say and what you do.
Right.
Um, and then if we go down to the lower right quadrant, this is where people really get, and organizations fail to really establish the culture that they want. And that's why
Hmm.
I've got over there, it says the missing link, the lower right quadrant.
Yeah.
Because an organization's structure, the decision rights, which can be at what level are decisions made or where in the company, the
Hmm.
processes, and especially these KPIs,
Hmm.
OKRs, which are like the goals of the business that are
Yeah.
laid out, and the way you reward your employees, they all have to align with the culture that you want. So in Mars, there's a big commitment to this,
Hmm.
and the leaders do walk the
Hmm.
talk in terms of what are the stated organizational values. But also, Mars is an interesting place because it is actually almost a holding company, in the sense
Hmm.
that different parts of Mars are run differently.
Mm.
So many people don't know this, Mars has the largest veterinary health clinic services structure in the US.
Wow.
And that group is a service proposition, and the culture is different.
Yeah.
And the really intimacy with pet owners, because they're face to face with pet owners, and of course,
Hmm.
pets, because they're hands on with the pets, is a really kind of lighthouse, and shines really bright in terms of the culture. And as a consequence, they're structured differently. And
Hmm.
so they're relatively autonomous from the rest of Mars. They sit on different systems. They're actually on a different
Hmm.
HR system, the same system, but a different version of it.
Okay.
and they're let alone to do what makes sense in that pet care space of the
Mm-hmm.
clinics.
Yeah.
And even within the entire pet care portfolio, which also includes the group that uh, has Iams pet food and some of these more
Mm-hmm.
traditional pet food brands,
Right.
that is one organization that, again, has its own structure, its own processes, it's a way that it approaches the market, which differentiates from Royal Canin, which is another business unit in the pet care group, which
Mm-hmm.
is different and was acquired. It's a French-based company, so its national culture and its organizational
Yeah.
culture is different, and the product's different. It's
Right.
really about pets who have allergies and things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in a way, Mars has left these pieces alone to be what they need to be, to really provide the right experience and a different sort of brand experience across all of those different service and product lines
Right.
by not trying to homogenize and get everybody on the same systems, not have employee rewards be the same in terms of bonus structures and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then leaders for years have been coming to me and saying, I want to shift my organizational culture. And I've told them, look, organizational culture is a lagging indicator of what you do in these other three quadrants. So if you really
Mm-hmm.
want to shift your culture, focus on these other three areas. And
Yeah.
that's really how you get it done.
Yeah. And there's just so much to think about there. And I love the point about, different uh, literal cultures, difference between how things operate in France versus the United States, and how, obviously companies like Mars that are so big have a lot of those day to day nuances to navigate, and smaller businesses as they begin to grow and merge into new markets. Uh, but we just came out of the last several years, such a big shift in our own dynamics in the workplace. Now everybody's shifting back to office, and there's so many morale issues around that, whether you're pro or against it. When there is some external force at play, how do you maintain your culture in your company?
Yeah, it's really good. I like where you're going with that, Leah. There's a couple things, right? So if we talk about COVID,
Hmm.
and in fact, my recent background is really impacted by COVID because when I was working at Cargill, I was in Minnesota.
Hmm.
I took the opportunity to move back to the East Coast, and where I grew up.
Yeah.
And then COVID ended, and they started pulling me back to Minnesota, wanted me to come back and be in
Sure.
office. And I mean, so many of us were just scratching our heads
Yeah.
because productivity and measurable productivity had gone up actually.
Yeah.
In you know, this is a company where there's a lot of people who didn't have an option, right? Because it's a large manufacturing base and you need to show
Right.
up every day.
Right.
So
Yes.
we're actually managing tensions there too, because you've got factory workers that are in there day to day,
Hmm.
and the office workers having this flexibility. So there's things to manage there.
Sure.
But when people are remote, it doesn't necessarily need to erode culture. It's just you need to pay attention to it.
Hmm.
And so one of the things that both Cargill and Syngenta would do that was really interesting was when they would start meetings, whether they were virtual or in person,
Hmm.
they had this moment at the beginning of the meeting. And I just loved it. So at
Hmm.
Cargill, it was about safety. And
Hmm.
they really cared. I mean, there's a lot of out there in the field, there's opportunities to really get hurt or for people for
Sure.
their fatalities.
Yeah.
And so from the CEO down, the message was, we're all about safety because we care about our employees. And
Hmm.
so even in a team like mine, which might tour a factory floor, might know those people, wasn't operating machinery, wasn't
Right.
climbing trees to get palm oil or things like
Hmm.
that.
Yeah.
We would start with safety moments in our meetings. And so somebody could talk about being Minnesota.
Hmm.
It was pretty scary driving in today. It's bad weather, snow, some ice. Here are the
Yeah.
things I did to try to stay safe. So they would let you bring it home, but it
Hmm.
was a real important piece of their culture. And Syngenta would do the same things and switch up the narrative on occasion.
Mm-hmm.
But really, what they at Syngenta, what we've done a great job of, was reestablishing what are the values and the mission of the company,
Right.
strategy, and then those opening moments that can be just 3 to 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Could be about one of those elements around here's how our team or I saw this moment of work that was contributing to those things that we say are important.
Yeah.
So even in a virtual setting, you can get this common bonding and this commitment, both interpersonally between the people in the meeting, but also reaching back and really tying into what the organization says is important and really holds valuable. So
Yeah.
it's things like that. They're really simple, but can be really meaningful and impactful.
Right. Absolutely. Yes. A simple implementation, 3 to 5 minutes, but yeah, reinforcing the
Yep.
company's values is a great tip. And I think it's so simple, almost it could get easily overlooked, that's just all that it could take to tie the message to everybody.
Yeah. And look, when you start doing it, people will roll their eyes, which is really
Sure.
important if you're a leader to model it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
if you're in a meeting, go, hey, wait a minute, we didn't do our safety moment. Who's going to talk about something that they saw in the last week?
Mm-hmm.
But after a while, it becomes habit, and then employees are like, it becomes engaging. Oh, this is something that we really care about. We're not talking about last quarter's results. We're not talking about that big sale that we lost. We're not talking about
Mm-hmm.
tariff impacts on our business. We're talking about this other thing, which
Yeah.
really, again, is important to how we perform, is part of our brand promise, but it's a connection point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Oh, so I want to go back to what you were talking about a minute ago about changing the culture within a company. Um, what typically is the catalyst for that when you hear people say that?
Well, in my world, it's there can be a market shift. There can be a strategy shift that's usually in reaction
Mm-hmm.
to a market shift.
Yeah.
There can be low employee engagement. There are a
Mm-hmm.
lot of different factors that can bring this up, or the company's meandered away from the culture that used to make it really click in the
Yeah.
past. So there are these certain symptoms that leaders come with, or people in the organization come with, and it's maybe you've lost your innovative edge.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you've become too bureaucratic. You haven't given the people the freedom to operate in an innovative way. So
Yeah.
you got to step back and say, look, and from a structural sense, maybe you become too centralized, and
Mm-hmm.
you need some deaggregation of that. Flexible organizations tend to be less centralized. So one of the hallmarks of an innovative company that's close to its customers is,
Mm-hmm.
in the instances of these big global companies, it's, we've forgotten really what it means to compete in Europe. We've kind of
Mm-hmm.
centralized, standardized to the extent where, or taken decision authority away from those people who are facing the customer. If
Mm-hmm.
you look at Nordstrom, what it was so famous for was those people on the floor helping
Right.
you make decisions. I think there's something like up to $1,000 of impact or something.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
and
That's what I've heard too.
all these degrees of freedom to satisfy the customer in the moment, and that's what has been their hallmark. Now it's a little different. The family sold them, and I when I walk into a Nordstrom, it doesn't feel the same. But
Yeah.
um, but those are some of the stuff you can think about as a business is if you have people out face to face with the customer, do they have the degrees of freedom to really
Mm-hmm.
do it right in the moment?
Yeah.
Um, and in service industries, there's something called service recovery, which is if you goof up, fix it really fast, and sometimes you'll get greater customer loyalty because of the way you reacted and you fixed it.
Mm-hmm.
So like Craftsman Tools, again, brand is
Yeah.
kind of on its demise, but used to be that thing breaks, take it back. They'll just give you another one, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So it's that type of stuff where, in that innovation phase, space as an example. Or,
Yeah.
maybe your thing is really about low cost.
Mm-hmm.
And so you've really got to have this culture that's really about efficiencies, economy. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
what is the right quality level? We actually don't have to make the best motorcycle in the
Mm-hmm.
market. Just got to bring one in that's reliable enough
Yeah.
at
And
this
affordable. Yeah.
and affordable at this price point where that's where we match. So let's not
Mm-hmm.
try to be Polaris.
Yeah.
Let's go for this other market that's outside of Polaris's reach, where we can really differentiate. And we don't have to be the best, but we're
Mm-hmm.
still providing value. People need those modes of transportation, just at a different price point.
Right. Absolutely. So, brands or companies that kind of dial back on a misstep, I'm going to bring up a very recent example with Cracker Barrel.
Mm,
Uh, so, as probably everybody who's listening knows very well, they have gone through this evolution of kind of modernizing certainly their logo, but also their stores and upset everybody. And then I just heard last week they're going to go back to their original logo that everybody was so upset. So, in terms of, harm to the brand that something like that causes, can you
yeah.
speak to that of these sort
Yeah.
of
Well,
missteps?
honestly, it remains to be seen whether that
Yeah.
was or wasn't the right step. I mean, they
Right.
just saw their customer base was growing smaller, right? So they thought they could pick up another one at the same time. And, maybe the right idea was to turn some Cracker Barrels into this other concept and
Right.
others not, right? Things like that. But yeah, again, it's a service recovery thing. I don't
Right.
Cracker Barrel, you're not ready. You can't turn that around quick enough to satisfy those dissatisfied customers. They're always going to be grumpy that you did that, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
Coke had the same thing too many years ago, right? And they
Yeah.
launched a brand, and people just said no.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, it's hard. You've got shifting customer demographics, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can't be all things to all people at all times, right? I forget
Sure.
the Abe Lincoln quote, but it was something along those.
Right. Yeah.
So if you're trying to rebuild a brand, you've got to go back. You know better than anybody, Leah, right? In this
Mm-hmm.
in the social media space,
Mm-hmm.
who are really the influencers? Who are the people out there that really matter to your brand? Can
Yeah.
get them back on board. I mean, Harley had that. Uh,
Mm-hmm. Right.
Sorry, I keep going off on this motorcycle riff,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I mean, Harley's brand stunk.
Yeah.
The bikes didn't work. They broke down. I don't even own a motorcycle, by the way. But
Yeah.
and then in the '90s, they really understood. Where our strength is really these groups who have a commitment to the brand, and they went
Mm-hmm.
out and they actually embraced this tribe of Harley owners.
Mm-hmm.
Did it on a regional level, helped them organize groups, um, started big into the merchandising with their branding on it, with their colors, with the orange and things of that nature. So they
Yeah.
turned around a dying brand, increased the quality, not to Polaris's level, but it
Mm-hmm.
was really, they understood that their strength was in community. And there's probably some element of that story that's applicable to any business, right? If you do take these missteps, like go back, do it again, you know how it is. You're going to lose a lot quicker, and it's going
Yeah.
to take a lot longer to build back up. But just stay committed, keep going along that path, and you'll get there, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. It's tough when you go, like you said, like shifting market dynamics and different consumer tastes to always stay on top of it. But I think part of it too, besides listening to your audience, what social media has greatly helped with, but also listening to your employees, right? And
Yeah.
so how can, you talked a little bit about it, but do employees realize, you think, how much contribution that they can have to the brand and help shaping the brand? Or do you feel that the perception typically is that they're kind of delivered it down? Maybe there's a cohort of people within a company that kind of lead it, but do you think that at some of these full places that you've been speaking of, that employees really feel that level that they are part of the brand's success?
The data says they don't.
Mm-hmm.
Forget who it was. Somebody just did a really large survey. It might have been the conference board or somebody. And
Mm-hmm.
and the data had been consistent for the last 3 years. And so they were asked, the question was really more around how much of the skills, the value that you can bring to the job, do you feel like you're able to do every day on the job?
Yeah.
And it's just stayed at 26%. So people feel like companies aren't utilizing 75% of what they could bring to the job and to the,
Mm-hmm.
we're doing a really bad job of it.
Yeah.
But some of the way to get there is to look into your company and see who the people who do model that and who get that are.
Mm-hmm.
And start to think about what are the characteristics of them and the way that they approach the work. And can we somehow energize that in the other folks?
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing you want to think about is who are the people in your organization that people turn to for answers? So throw out the organizational chart.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not about hierarchy. There's always someone or people that folks go to for answers. And they actually, those are the people who carry your culture.
Mm-hmm.
So if they're not on board with, you know, the service or product proposition to your customer, to values that you want to deem important in your company, you really got to turn that around. And that's the
Mm-hmm.
easiest way to start shifting the culture is to start engage those people.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things is just come to them, and have a conversation with them about
Mm-hmm.
where do you think the gaps are? What are the things we can improve? And if they help you co-design the solution a little bit,
Yeah.
they're all in.
Right.
You've just engaged them and got them committed to this. And so that's on one side. You also don't want to ignore the squeaky wheels.
Mm-hmm.
There's always that person who stands up in the meeting and is like, I'm going to do the wah, wah, wah,
Right.
and everybody's, oh God,
Yeah.
there it goes.
Why'd you have to ask another question?
Yeah, come on, Tim, can you just sit down? But there's there's something in what they're saying that holds true.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And if you can get them into this conversation, have them feel heard, let them be squeaky all they want,
Mm-hmm.
you might well turn that around. If
Yeah.
they feel like they've been heard, because they're
Yeah.
usually talking about the downsides of something you're doing. And there's
Mm-hmm.
downsides to every decision or any type of
Right.
strategy or approach that the company takes. So sometimes you actually glean some of that. And if you can get that person to see that, well, we're talking about these upsides, but we do understand there's these downsides, and here's how we're managing it. This
Mm-hmm.
is a typical change management principle. They'll
Yeah.
go, okay, they've heard me. They're not ignoring what I'm saying, and they're addressing it and showing me that they're managing it. If there's some warning signal of when we go down to that downside, they've got a tracking measure or something
Mm-hmm.
that throws up a red flag. They're going to address what I think is something they're ignoring and what I'm squeaking about.
Right.
So yeah,
So this is a little bit of a particular question, but so in that instance, what do you think the time frame is for a company to actually implement that change to appease the squeaky wheel? What's the leeway there? Because we get so bogged down with running the business, and though it's important to listen and to implement, you
yeah,
know,
it's hard. Every company is lean, right? Especially
yeah,
smaller businesses. You don't
yeah,
need to tell that to your audience, right? I mean,
yeah,
just don't look. If you're the owner, how many hours are you working? How many days a week?
hmm,
It's really, really hard.
yeah,
Um, so it is something that's tough to do, but even a little bit's better than nothing,
hmm,
and shifting culture takes time.
yeah,
Like I said, it's a lagging indicator of what you're doing in those other parts of those quadrants.
right,
And, in large companies, you're talking 12, 18 months.
hmm,
When we start a culture change, don't measure 3 months after. You're just going to be disappointed and think like you
right,
failed. Like wait,
sure,
continue, be systemic about it. In a smaller company, it should take a lot less time, right? Because you
yeah,
got less people to influence. But you can implement the solutions to the symptoms you're seeing, but you're
hmm,
always going to see some lag, and you just got to stick
yeah,
with it. And the good
yeah,
thing is, in smaller companies, people have visibility, more visibility to
Right.
you if you're the business owner.
Yeah.
So a lot of this modeling the behaviors and talking the talk and walking the talk, day
Hmm.
safety ratio,
Yeah.
change can happen a lot quicker. Yeah.
Yeah. And communicating what's happening, even though there maybe that thing isn't implemented yet, but this is what
Yeah.
we're working on. And
Celebrate any success you see, you
yeah.
know, and if something goes wrong, and acknowledge it and say, hey, look, this really doesn't hold to what we said is important. Let's talk about why, and let's
Hmm.
see what we're going to do different the next time. I mean, in consulting, we talk about after action reviews, like how well
Hmm.
did that work? Let's
Right.
analyze what we didn't do well, and let's continue doing what works and discard what doesn't.
Hmm. Yeah. And so along those lines, you know, a lot of it could be reactively to things that are happening within the company or shifts that are pushed upon us. But what about proactively? Like how often should a company review their culture and say, let's take a good look at this and see what we need to do? Are we as good as we should be?
Well, it really should. You know, again, large company experience, but companies
Hmm.
used to chart out 3 to 5 year strategies. Now they're
Hmm.
like, let's get the annual plan, the annual strategy done. So
Yeah.
I would say at least on an annual basis,
Hmm.
if you're, on a fiscal calendar, that's usually, you're starting to do business planning for the next year, starting to plan where you're going to
Hmm.
invest, what's going to happen.
Right.
That's a really good time to think about what are the things we need to start doing differently in this culture space and this employee engagement, in really modeling what's going to make us successful in the future and today. And
Hmm.
it's, again, it's really hard if, if you're running 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, that's tough. But
Yeah.
if you can address both, like what's the current state, what's the near term, and what's longer term, and if you can build for the long term.
Hmm.
I worked with a great fellow, Robert Jacobs, in this change world, and one of his
Hmm.
principles was if you start to think and act like you're the organization you want to be, you'll get
Hmm.
there quicker.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
That's
and
good.
with whatever means you can, just start modeling what you believe
Hmm.
the future should be, and change will happen.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. And that makes me think, for brand new emerging brands, which we have plenty of people, listen that are just starting up and they're thinking about culture. What advice do you have for them as they're starting new ventures?
Well, again, I mean, and there's a business maturity model that accompanies
Hmm.
this, right? I mean, you're a startup, you got to be innovative, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and you're going to have to shift and change. And these folks know this, right? It's like a month from
Hmm.
now, landscape might look different. You might go, oh, no, we're going this way. We
Right.
really need to go this way. So you have to stay nimble. You have to stay flexible, and you can't get entrenched with what you thought was going to.
Right. Yeah. That's not going to be a good path to success.
Yeah. The real challenge for a lot of businesses is when they start to move through these stages.
Uh-huh.
Okay, we've been innovative, we grabbed market share. There's a lot of tech startup here in the Boston area around bio and
Right.
life sciences and things like that. The challenge for a lot of companies is, okay, we've proved we've got a viable product. Now we're
Hmm.
going to grow in these ways. Now we need some management acumen. We do
Hmm.
need to start to implement some systems.
Yeah.
And a lot of founders um, love the startup phase, and
Yeah.
that's really where they ought to stay is, and maybe cash out, go start something new. I mean, this
Hmm.
this is what VCs look at, right? It's like,
Yeah.
who's growing a company to this size? At what point are we going to bring in more
Yeah.
seasoned management at this level of?
To keep it
I'd worked
growing.
with an automotive supplier, and that was their challenge. They were 500 million,
Hmm.
really fantastic product. These rolled steel bumpers, and the automotive companies loved them, but they said, "Look, you're 500 million. You don't have a large enough global footprint. You're
Right.
probably going to need to grow to a billion."
Hmm.
Worked with the founder to reorganize the board, which previously had been golf buddies who'd also been very successful business people, but weren't the
Yeah.
people that could guide the company to a billion in
To a
size.
billion. Right.
Yeah. and then looked at who in the leadership ranks should succeed, who had the attributes that would succeed in this billion-dollar company, things of that nature. So it's really common in business to reach these points of shift, and you got to recognize when you're there and what it's going to take in the next shift.
And how the startup CEO handles that shift if they are then moving just to a board position, for example, it was really going to, I would imagine, is really going to affect the next level of culture in the company as they grow to that billion-dollar
Well, it
level.
really is. In these tech spaces, sometimes they become the chief technology officer because that's really their passion.
Mm-hmm.
So that doesn't mean there's not a role in the company. It doesn't mean there's not an important role, but
Right.
It's understanding what the right role is. I'm sorry, Leah. I don't know if I answered your question there.
Yeah, no, that it's you did. It's I just want people to make sure that they're thinking of this as they're growing and what the big picture looks like. And so,
Yeah.
yes, so thank you for your advice on that. So we're nearing our time, but I want to make, is there anything else in this space that you wanted to share because you just have such a wealth of knowledge here?
I can't think of anything, Leah, but
Okay.
maybe we'll do another one of these sometime.
Yeah,
We'll come up with some
absolutely.
other places we could explore.
Fantastic. So then my last question for you today, which we ask all of our guests, is what has been your recipe to revenue? What's been your secret sauce in your
Oh,
career?
my secret sauce. Well, for me personally, it actually has been pivoting. Honestly, I've
Mm-hmm.
had a really successful academic career, pivoted over to a boutique consulting firm, and then went to these internal roles. And every role's been different, and learning along the way. You know what I mean? Like in this conversation today, I've pulled across all those experience, right, to kind of come to these conclusions, and
Yeah.
stuff you learn outside of work,
Mm-hmm.
kids, whatever. These things
Yeah.
all contribute to what's going to make you successful in
Right.
business.
Yeah.
So
Always be learning. I like to
always be
tell my
learning.
kids that.
Don't be afraid to bring in some lesson from coaching your kid's soccer game. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's just like it's all part of the
Yeah.
mix, right?
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, Karl, thank you so much for joining me today. I loved learning from you, and I know everybody else will as well. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, Leah. Thank
Okay,
you.
we'll talk soon. Bye.